moving ahead, I would like to invite Professor Anjal Prakash, Research Director at Bharti Institute of Public Policy, to kindly deliver the closing address for Day 2. Professor Anjal will be sharing some insights on climate science with us. Professor Anjal, ladies and gentlemen.
Tough act to follow because we had two very interesting sessions on climate change, and now I'm going to bring you 10 new insights in climate science. This is actually part of a global group which is called Future Earth, where I'm collating with the group of other scientists across the world. Every year, some advances that happens in climate science. So I'm just going to take you through these advances, and let's just go. And then, because the end of the day session, I'm going to be very quick, and these are going to be 10 points, 10 minutes, right? Okay, so this is part of the research which is there, and it's published in the journal called Global Sustainability. It's freely available for you all to access it. So what are the insights? First is that if you see the entire issue of what we call the adaptation, and what we are seeing is that we are as the global warming happening, we are already breaching the limits to adaptation. And the point that we have come across is that there is a soft limit to adaptation, there's a hard limit to adaptation. We are actually breaching both the limits as we are warming. And what is expected is by end of century, we are supposed to be 1.5 degree warmer. The new IPCC report tells us that by 2050 itself will be 1.5 degree warmer. So we are actually breaching that. So that's number one point that I want you to drive home. The second part where I was more closely involved in this was looking at the vulnerability hotspots. What we found is about 1.6 billion people are actually living in what we call climate change hotspots, vulnerability hotspots, and this number is going to be doubled by 2050. That means that some of the very fragile regions of the world are going to be facing extreme climate risk, as you see. If you look at the South Asian region, we have two areas. One is the Himalayan glaciers. As you know, that with the global warming, the glaciers are already declining, retreating. Same time, we also see that some of the regions of the world, especially because of the global warming, this is going to be under huge threats. We have a long coastline, so there is a predictability that the severity and the frequency of climate-led events, especially the cyclones, are going to be more pronounced. And this is something that is worrisome for us. The third insight is that if you look at the climate and health interactions, and what we found in the new IPCC report, as well as some of the work which is happening on the climate science, and it's the climate change impact on health, there are new diseases which has been also cropping up. The impact of climate change on the health of humans, not only humans but also animals and the entire ecosystems, are increasingly widespread, and the new risk is actually emerging. So this is something which is slightly under-researched area, but thankfully some scientists have been working on looking at the climate change impact on health, and this is something that has come up as one of the new insights, number 3. If you look at the couple of risks that we have in this slide, we will find that there are, the issue of, say, infectious diseases, loss of biodiversity because of floods and wildfires and extreme hits. These are risks which is actually leading to the impact which is on mental health, physical health, and also mortality. And this is something which is being established by the new climate science that we've seen in the new climate report. The fourth part is about mobility. As we see that the increased mass migrations happening, especially from climate risk areas to other areas, and the report is also telling us that the climate change is increasingly affecting what we call the human mobility. The anticipatory action is needed to assist mobility and also to reduce this displacement that's happening. So earlier there was this whole concept of the migration definitely is a multifaceted phenomena. You can't attribute only only one climate change issues, but then increasingly we're seeing that migrations are actually happening from climate risk zone, and that is where, some of the, if you see, the global data is telling us that about 90% of the migration actually migration happening from what we call the weather-related phenomena, be it floods, be it storms, wildfires, drought, landslides, and rising temperatures. So these are attribution which has happened very recently, and some of the reports have actually been copied. Earlier, what we've seen mainly from Africa, migration is happening from the conflict zone, but that has overseeded the migration which is happening from the disaster-prone areas, especially climate change-led disasters. The fifth point is about human security, and climate security are going hand in hand. So if you really want human security issues to be upward, and in terms of the risk which we have for human security, that has to be tackled. Climate security must have to be tackled as well. And there are, and we have seen that the climate insecurity is accelerating the human security insecurity, and that's one point which has been becoming very pronounced. It's pronounced. The sixth point is about the land use, the sustainable land use, and there's a, before the sixth assessment report, there was a special report on land by IPCC, which has also brought out these issues of climate change and its impact on land. What we found also that there's an urgent and the radical shift in land use is required to meet the climate change targets, including what we call the halting the expansion of the natural areas into natural areas. So this is something this is coming very, very strongly, the interlinkage between the land use patterns as well as the climate change issues at the target that we have. The seventh point is about the investment, especially the private finances which is available. This has been, and there have been some global studies which is showing that the finances are not coming up. One is that especially the private finance is not, it's failing to help people in the process of adaptation. Sustainable finance practices in the private sector are actually failing to harness investment that are meaningfully contributing to meeting climate targets. And that's something that, especially the insurance part, which was taken as a big part of climate change, especially the private insurance, that hasn't come up very well in protecting the livelihood of the people. And there's something, if you look at this slide, which is actually showing us how the sustainable finance, the annual insurance in the market outlook, shows that the very small, minuscule part of the finance actually is focusing on what we call the sustainability and the green and the social part of it. So that's something that we have to really look out for. The eighth point, and this COP has been very good in actually telling us about what we call the loss and damage fund. This has been also brought out by the scientists that loss and damage is definitely a planetary imperative. It's an urgent need for people, because today's climate change, especially in the global south, is not the creation of the people staying in the global south. It is the creation of the global north, especially the industrialized north, and that means they must pay up for the damage that they have created to the environment, and people are impacting. In fact, some of the economies, like some of the countries like Bhutan and all, Nepal, these are countries which are climate neutral or climate negative, but they are increasingly facing the problem. So loss and damage fund, now there's a lot of details has to be done post-COP, when probably in the years to come we'll know what this fund is going to be. But there's something that is an important point that I wanted to bring forward, that the coordinated global policy response is definitely important for looking at what we call the past and current and the expected future losses and damages that we have. There has been issues of attribution, there has been issues of how do you actually decide who pays how much, but that the devils probably would lie in more detail, but we'll deal with that later. But at least we have something that we can actually be slightly proud of, that we have been able to negotiate to bring loss and damage issues on the agenda of the COP. This is, I'll just skip this slide in the interest of time, but I'll just come to last 2 points. the ninth point is about what we call the inclusive decision-making process. See, climate change is a global phenomena, but it actually has a very localized impact. And that means that the people who are directly impacted by climate change must come and be part of the decision-making process. And there, historically, and literature also tells us that there hasn't been much happen in terms of bottom-up planning. There's a lot of top-down planning, but not much of bottom-up approaches. And that's where I think if you really want adaptation to be effective, long-lasting, and we need to actually have more and more people, especially, say, in Indian condition, for example, the panchayat, the ward level people in the urban location, they must come forward, and the political participation of people in actively planning is important, and that's where this ninth point lies. The 10th one is about what we call the breaking down of our the structural barriers and unsustainable lock-ins. Now, some portion of it was covered in the last session as well about the climate imperialism that we see. We need transformative action, but we also have some structural barriers that we, both at the level of global north versus global south, but also within the countries that you have. And these structural barriers could also be talking about what we call the resource-intensive economy. There hasn't been much transition unless you have this transition to what we call low carbon economy, and there are ways and means to do that. That is where the crux lies. Otherwise, tomorrow we'll also, China and India has already been talked about. We are also going to be in the queue of the so-called climate polluters of the world. We already are number 3 in terms of the total carbon emission that happens globally. So tomorrow, 15 to 20 years down the lines, we are also going to be in the queue. So I think that's the whole charting out of the structural changes in which how we can bring in the low carbon economy and built into our process of achieving growth as well as development, but being climate benign is something that we need to look out for. My 10 points are over. Thank you so much for listening to me at the end of the day. Thank you so much. See you.